All right, everybody. So thank you guys for coming in tonight. And we have Angela from, I don't know if I've been pronouncing this right or not, but it's Ange Fierro Fanning
Ferraro.
Homestead. Ferraro. Okay.
Yep, you're
All
fine.
right. I thought maybe it was something like that. Then I was like, I don't know, man. Every time I try to pronounce something, I end up getting it wrong. But thank you so much, Angela, for coming on tonight and being a part of this. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks for asking me to be on.
Yes, ma'am. So, we were talking earlier, and everything is focused around homesteading here. Whether it's gardening or animals or and all that. And you have got one of the most spectacular places I've seen on Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube. I am blown away by what you do there and everything you have, and the the permaculture system that you've built on your homestead. So, first of all, can you tell us what got you into wanting to do homesteading and stuff, and your passion for it?
Yeah, no, and thank you for that. That's quite a compliment. One of the most spectacular places on social media. That's a big deal. So thank you. I kind of fell into homesteading. I did not grow up on a family farm. I sort of fell into it. I went to college for graphic and website design and had my own business for about a decade. And I just got really burnt out. And then after I had my first child, I kind of thought, I don't want to be behind a computer anymore. I'd always
Right.
had like a passion for ornamental and just kind of hobby gardening. And I had like a backyard plot with, a few tomatoes and lettuce and that sort of thing. But I mean, it was a passion that I was kind of going unnurtured, and I would find myself canceling my graphic design meetings so that I could go spend time out in the garden. And so when I first really decided, hey, this is actually not what I want to do anymore. I want to get away from graphic design. I really felt like I had this calling to grow food, and I'm very fortunate to have a dual income marriage, and so my husband and I talked about it and we thought, okay, how can we make the numbers work so that I could step back from a steady paycheck and instead supplement basically all homegrown produce for the cost that I was bringing in. You spend a lot of money on organic food at
Right.
Whole Foods, at any grocery store. And so I thought if I'm actually growing these things and learning how to preserve it so we can really put a huge, massive dent in our grocery bill, would that make sense financially for us? And it did. It worked. And I started kind of just by going all in on a 3/4 acre plot. And I learned how to grow up instead of out, because I had limited space. And I started replacing a lot of these ornamentals with edibles. And so I was ripping out bushes that weren't doing well and putting in cherry bushes and blueberry bushes, and took beekeeping courses, and we brought ducks in. And so, we hear a lot about how folks are really feeling confined to a small space when they start growing. They don't think that they can
Right.
grow anything substantial. You can do it. It's just learning how to do it differently from these large, expansive horizonous gardens.
Right.
Horizonous, is that a word? But these gardens that run from edge to edge of the skyline, it doesn't have to look like that in order to really honestly sustain your family. There's a lot of cracks, crevices, trellises that you can grow in that you might not think of. And that's how I kind of fell into homesteading, was this idea that it became very addictive, very rewarding, such a huge sense of accomplishment when I would grow something and preserve it. The taste, the nutrient content, and the sheer fact that I had learned and accomplished a skill, it was like, okay, sign me up. What else can I learn about? And it just snowballed and kept going.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And you're right. So a lot of times, we're on 1 acre here,
Hmm.
right? You start out with 3/4 of an acre.
Yeah,
That it's small. Some
yeah,
people look at it and be like, oh, 3/4 or an acre. That's a lot of property. It's really not. Once you start gardening on that, it really dwindles down quite fast, right? And so we're used to seeing, these, around here, especially where I'm at, farms that are just forever as far as you can see, and the way that they're growing. And so in our minds, we say, oh, well, that's how we have to grow, right? And so
right.
you're right that you can grow and you can overcome that and learn how to trellis differently and put things in every little nook and cranny you can find to
Yeah.
grow in, right? And learn how to
Yeah.
grow vertically instead of out, like you were saying. So that's awesome. So what got you attracted to the other part of homesteading with the animals?
The first brush I had with animals was actually with the ducks. And um, we wanted to have fresh eggs was the idea, right? And so I will be honest, a lot of people hate me for this. I just don't like chickens. I just don't.
Right.
So I didn't want chickens. And we also, New Jersey's a really wet climate. And we had a stream at the time. We still have a stream now. And ducks were just a better fit for not just our actual terrain and our environment, but also just for all of the pests that we have, snails and slugs, as a byproduct of living where we do. And so I decided, okay, yeah, let's give the ducks a shot for the eggs. But what really sold me on getting poultry was just that they could lend a helping hand to the garden. I could use compost as fertilizer. I could use their bills as a means for pest protection in the garden, and they would ingest those for me. And so, really, it just sort of became this realization like, oh, hey, gardening isn't supposed to be in isolation. It's
Right.
not supposed to be just a human derived initiative. It actually is supposed to be an ecosystem in itself. And, we can talk about the soil being an ecosystem. We can talk about the plants and companions and blah, blah, blah. And those take shape in an ecosystem. But when you start bringing in animals, then you're really you're alleviating a lot of the work on the part of the gardener or the human. You are inviting natural solutions to pest problems. You're enhancing soil the way nature intended it to be enhanced. And so, again, it was one of those situations where I learned and I saw, and it was like, what else did I not realize could be helping me out in the garden? And now I actually have horses, I have sheep, I have guinea fowl, and in some way, they all contribute to my growing spaces, all of them. And it's pretty cool,
It
right?
is.
Because my main effort, my main initiative is to grow as much of my own food for my family as possible. And yeah, sure, having some horses and having some sheep, they need some land, they need space. My yields are more productive. I'm getting more food than I ever have been because I'm just going about it differently.
That's awesome. So I've got ducks. I like
Yeah.
ducks more than chickens. My
Okay.
wife likes chickens more than the ducks.
Oh,
The geese, those are a different thing, too. We have a small stream, and
yeah.
it's down over the hill. So what I did, I don't own the property, but I know the guy that does, and I
Okay.
said, "Hey, look, can I let my geese through the fence? They'll go down. It's nothing but woods,
Yeah.
right? I mean, so it's not like they're going to hurt anything, but can they travel in the woods down to the stream, have fun in the stream, and then they come back, right?" And he's like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
sure, do that." I said, "Okay, great."
Yeah.
The moment I've tried to let them in the garden, ducks and the geese, they terrorize my large leaf plants. And I like zucchinis, pumpkins, stuff like that. They just mow them down. So do you got any tips for trying to keep them? Is there only certain plants they can go around, or what am I doing wrong that they're eating my pumpkin and zucchini leaves?
So it's definitely not that you're doing something wrong. It's just that do you have a lot of squash bugs?
We have a lot of squash bugs, yes, tons of those, and lots of snails.
So that's what they're doing. They're just working.
Okay.
And in trying to ingest eggs from squash bugs, eat the squash bugs, go after those snails, they may be inadvertently also grabbing a bite of the leaf. A squash and a pumpkin or a gourd, they can absolutely sustain a few nibbles on some leaves. Now, if you're thinking that maybe the ducks are just wreaking too much havoc, you can do a couple of different things. One would be just put one duck in that area.
Okay.
Don't turn the whole flock in that area. How many ducks do you have?
We got 10 ducks and 5 geese.
Okay. So if you're releasing 15 birds in an area that is infested with squash bugs or snails, they're all going to go after that. They know that, right? They're wired to look and hunt for their food. But if you don't have enough plants to sustain that amount of foragers, just decrease the number and maybe also just pull them out after like an hour. So
Okay.
I would say either decrease the time that you're allowing them to forage or decrease the quantity of the foragers you have.
Okay. All right. And you don't have any, there's no worry of them. Like my worry, it was because I thought about maybe only letting a few go, but anytime that one gets out, let's say one of the geese get out on their own, they'll run back and forth in their, because they got a huge allotment that they're allowed to go through. But instead of going wherever they got out at and going back that way, they run up to the top, and then all the geese or all the ducks, congregate in that one area. So if I was to pull the one out and stick them over there, do you think that they would still do their job, or do you think they'd still try to congregate back around where the rest of them are? Because I mean, or do they have that? Do they have that tendency? I guess is what I'm getting at, to want to be around each other.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something to be said for a flock mentality when it comes to geese or ducks. But, I've taken before in the spring, especially when you have crops that aren't as developed, or maybe you just have less established crops as some other ones are starting to grow in. I'll just grab a few birds. I'll take 3 or 4 and turn those in, and they're happy in a small group. I think that if you were just to do one, yeah, they would probably see their flock mates and want to go head towards that direction. But if you grab, a few, I think you'd be okay.
Okay, all right,
Yeah,
because I'll definitely try that out, because I've got my plants are huge. I got massive pumpkin plants,
yeah,
but every time they either get out, or I put them over there, or now they're even getting to where they'll just reach through
uh-huh.
their we use netting,
Yeah,
and they'll just reach through and just start plucking. And I was like, I don't understand why they're doing this. Like, it was not clicking on me why they're tearing the leaves up.
sure.
And so that makes sense though. They're either looking for the eggs, or they're actually hunting the actual bug itself. So that makes a lot of
Yeah,
sense.
yeah.
Um, how are you? I got goats. You got sheep. How are you using your sheep to kind of help with your permaculture techniques there?
Yeah, so I do have a proper garden that's fenced in, and that's where I grow a lot of my tender annuals, and it's mixed with perennial plantings. But I also have a lot of other growing spaces that are more out in the open. And one thing that I use sheep for is to go through and sort of weed out those areas. I actually have pictures of my sheep grazing right next to brassicas. They're next to broccoli, cauliflower. They're not going after that. And I think a lot of times we forget to tap into preferred forage. If there is a ton of grass available to the animal that wants to eat grass, it's absolutely going to go for that before it's going to go over before my or that go after my broccoli plants. So
Right,
that's where I just have to give a little bit of supervision. I may be walking or working in a growing space nearby, and just kind of keep an eye on them while I have them turned out in those spaces. And they're going to take care of those weeds. We have a lot of different grasses that grow here, a lot of leaves that the sheep prefer. And that was part of the reason why I brought in sheep, because they're a more appropriate stock for the spaces that I'm growing in. I don't tend to have a lot of the, woodier, more dense vegetation that a goat favors. And so if I brought that into my growing space, because of what naturally pops up here weed wise, they absolutely would probably go after my garden crops rather than
right,
grow after what the weeds are, because it's not their preferred diet.
right.
So yeah, the sheep help me in that capacity. Obviously, I compost, and so they're contributing their nutrients into the soil. But the other thing they do is they keep my horses healthy through parasite ingestion, and they reduce our horse parasite counts. And that's a good thing, because obviously I like to have my horses around, and the horses contribute to the garden in their way. So it's another way that the sheep contribute to the system. A lot of people get sheep because they want the wool, they want the yarn. And while I absolutely have sent sheared wool to a mill, I didn't go after sheep because I was looking to be a
Right,
yarn, harvester or
right.
wool harvester. Um, that's a plus. That's a perk. The real reason I have them is for their grazing abilities.
That's awesome. So
Thanks.
the sheep are contributing to keeping the parasites down for the horses.
Yeah.
That is I didn't know that they could do that. That is very, very interesting.
Yeah. So it's kind of one thing that's really cool about the way that nature was designed. A lot of parasites out in the field or excuse me, out in the pasture are species specific. And so if you're just constantly turning horses out alone into the same spaces, they're prone to parasites, which is why we bring in dewormers and other things. And a lot of folks will say, "Oh, sunshine is a great dewormer. That breaks down the egg counts in your pastures," and that's true. However, if you do co-species grazing, mixing species, it's really a great insurance policy against parasites because these parasites are dead end hosts. And so when you bring in an animal, it grazes and then you rotate it to the next pasture. And then in my case, bring in the sheep after the horses. They are now going through grazing another part of that foliage, another part of that grass blade, and they're also ingesting some of that parasitic larva. And because those sheep are not the intended host of the parasite,
Right.
parasite dies. And so then what ends up happening is the horses have gone through, the sheep go through. Now I bring my birds through. When they're not in my growing spaces, they're in the fields. And they're breaking apart the manure, looking for insects. So now my fertilizer, my manure is dragged out. I don't drag out my manure. The birds do that for me. And then they're also ingesting parasites while they look for their insects. So they've gone through and then the pasture rests. So before the first group, that group of horses comes back to the pasture, there's about 21 to 28 days that passes by. And that breaks the cycle. And not only does the time duration and the sunshine break it, the animal ingestion by other species breaks it. And so we don't have to deworm anymore. We have fecal count checks. I make sure everybody's happy and healthy. This is really the way nature intended it.
That is awesome. Like, that's just mind blowing.
It is.
Like that's I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What kind of sheep do you have? Only thing I know like about sheep is like, Dorper sheep, that are more like your the ones that you don't have to, I guess, shear. Right.
Yeah. No, I have, that's a good question. I have Romney sheep and I have Shetland because those breeds do really well on pasture. They're great permaculture sheep. They have a lot of grass here where I am in central New Jersey, so they do really well. I absolutely do give them just a small amount of feed just to close any nutritional gaps, and they get their minerals. But they are happy and healthy and can easily sustain themselves just on natural forage.
That's awesome. So the horses, what are the horses contributing to this whole awesome permaculture that this is just awesome.
Sure. So there are a lot of permaculture professionals that don't think that horses have a place in a permaculture system. I disagree. The reason being because number one, I have draft horses. That's a lot of manure. That's a lot of hot compost. So it only takes me about 3 to 4 months to hot compost manure to a usable growing medium for my garden. So I'm replacing a lot of nutrients, not just in my gardens and growing spaces, but also in my home orchards. And then we also have a hobby vineyard. So I use a lot. And so that works out well quantity wise. The other thing that they do is they graze. And so in spaces when we moved to the farm that weren't growing spaces before, I was able to do a couple of things. One, I have them go through and graze all of that grassy forage and clear the area. The second thing that I do is I start piling compost a season in advance. So my favorite thing to grow in this way, out in the trees, in the woods, in the fields, are pumpkins. I start laying down their compost and create fields on top of the soil and just pile it up several inches high. And that cold composts in place for an entire year. The following season, I plant my pumpkin seeds in my gourds directly into what once was that manure. It is so dense and nutrient rich. I get the biggest pumpkins. They are sprawling all over the place because they're heavy feeders and they need that.
Right.
So that the horses give me new growing spaces. And then the other thing they do is they keep the sheep healthy. They help me with seeding my pasture spaces. I do a lot of cover crops, and so they help with that. So they contribute to growing in that capacity. And then also they haul in my harvests for me, and they haul the manure in a wagon up to the compost heap. So they're bringing out their output, and then they're bringing in my harvest, which is a good deal.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
Thank you.
What's the biggest pumpkin you ever grown?
Oh my God, I didn't weigh it. I couldn't get it on a scale, but it really was like I have pictures on my social media feed. Like these things were easily beyond my knees in height, like ground to be. Right. They're massive, absolutely massive.
So if I send you some seeds, would you grow some off of my 1,000+ pound pumpkins?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would love to.
You got my information. You can message me your address, and I'll send you some seeds up there from some of my 1,000 pound pumpkins.
All right, Let's see
Yeah,
how big these pumpkins can get. That sounds good.
yeah, because I would love to see how big you can get one of these. Because I'm
Okay.
sitting here listening to this, and I'm like, this is good because I take my pig manure and stuff, and I'll put that on top of all winter long on top of my beds, right, or
Sure.
my patches,
Sure.
and then I'll just till it all in the springtime, and then grow in that, and it does really well. The pumpkin plants, as far as I'm concerned, they are smaller where I do the pig manure at, and they get bigger faster than they do on the patches I don't use my pig manure on. Like
Interesting.
yeah, it. I grew the world record butternut. It was 83 pound 1 ounce in 2021,
You did?
and yeah, and it was grown in pig manure.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, and it grew in 38 days. So it should have been able to grow at least a day 60 to 70, somewhere around in there.
Sure.
So, but the frost hit me and stuff. And before that, the plant had already grew a 59. Well, it was 60 pounds when I accidentally broke it off the vine. So
Sure.
technically that year there was over 120 pounds grown on that plant. Just in 2 butternuts. So it was a lot of fun that year. But yeah, I would love to see some giant pumpkins grown in horse manure. That would be a lot of fun.
All right.
So,
Well, we'll see what I can do.
yeah. Send me your address, and I'll send you some seeds off. I got. Well, today I just did turn in my 19th state record. So
Well done. That's amazing.
thank you. So
Yeah,
I'm hoping, hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get 20 to 25 state records this year total, and I can turn that in for a world record of having the most state records at one time.
that's
So,
awesome.
we'll
Wow.
see. Hopefully it'll work out. But what are you growing? So we've heard about what you do to kind of prep the soil, how you're using your animals to keep everything balanced. What all do you grow, like tomatoes and stuff like that? What's your go-tos, I guess?
Yeah. So pretty much what I'm trying to do here is eliminate produce groceries um, for as many months as I can. And so by that, I don't just mean like fresh tomatoes. I also mean all tomato products, ketchup, barbecue sauce, tomato sauce. And so I'm growing, let's see, I think I currently have 40 tomato plants in the ground because I use them for fresh eating, right? And then I use them for processing and canning and all that. So we've got the typical annuals that people get: peppers, jalapenos. We've got tomatoes, green beans. We've got zucchini and squash. I don't do eggplant because nobody really eats it but me, so it's not really worth my time anymore. We've got tomatillos. And then we have a lot of spring crops and a lot of fall crops, which consists of all the cold, heavy hitters: beets, all your different greens. We've got arugula, all our different herbs, cilantro. We've got turnip, peas, if I didn't say that already. So basically, we have all of your typical annual garden varieties. But then the other thing that I do that's a little different is I put a lot of importance on perennial plants. And the reason that I do that is because it's less labor intensive and they absorb more carbon and sink it in the soil. And then they also invite a lot of inhabitants wildlife wise. So we have
Right.
beneficial insects like praying mantis, we have birds, and that's going to also help to contribute when it comes to garden pest management. So I have a lot of garden space, both in the garden proper and then in outside growing spaces for perennial kales, tree collards. There's something called longleaf ground cherry, which is a perennial. Obviously, we have raspberries, strawberries, blueberries, a lot of perennial herbs that are coming up. And then we have the orchard spaces. Good King Henry spinach is a perennial. We've got a lot of onions that are perennials. And then obviously each year we do onion and garlic. We do potatoes, sweet potatoes. So we're pretty much growing it all.
Right. So I know you're processing it to make, you like your tomatoes. You said you're, using it to make barbecue sauce, ketchup, and all that.
Yeah.
What else are you like? Are you making tinctures and things like that, or are you just basically canning everything or dehydrating it?
Canning, freezing, and dehydrating are my main methods of food preservation. I tried fermenting. No, it wasn't. No, I
It
think I
don't
did.
taste good.
I did a lot of things wrong. I'm not sure what I did wrong. I'll revisit it at some point, but that didn't work out well for me. Um, So I don't do fermenting. I do a lot of jams and jellies, you know, with a lot of the fruit. Um, yeah, those. But with canning, it's not just water bath. It's also I had to learn pressure canning, right? Because that
Right.
gives you a lot more flexibility and safe safety wise, you know, you can get things to a higher heat. So I have more versatility with what I can process and can. Freeze drying, I would like to try, but I've not done that yet.
And that is also very expensive trying to freeze dry because
Yeah,
that thing is like $3,500 for the little one, right?
I
So,
know. And
and if Harvest Right is listening, both of us would take one in a
yeah,
heartbeat.
yeah. You can sponsor us.
Yeah, exactly. But so the perennials though, that's awesome. So they're putting carbon back into the soil. Is that what you said?
Yeah, so all plants through the process of photosynthesis, right? They absorb carbon from the atmosphere. That's just part of how they grow, and they release oxygen and they absorb it into their plant tissues. And excess that they absorb goes down into the roots, and if they can absorb even more than that, they leach it into the soil. And so when you think about this whole process of photosynthesis and carbon absorption, and you think about really big plants and ones that have very woody tissues, get very large, massive root systems, and go deep, deep within the soil sublayers, you are going to absorb massive amounts of carbon and be able to sink it into the atmosphere. Now, some trees absorb carbon at a much faster rate and a lot more over their lifespan in terms of quantity than other trees. Silver maple is incredible. So is moringa. Um, or excuse me, I misspoke. Moringa actually does nitrogen. But you can start thinking of trees as a means of absorbing carbon, fixing it into the soil, and sequestering it there. So
Okay,
one of the things that we do here, despite the fact that we have and graze animals, is that we absorb and sequester more carbon than what we emit.
that's awesome. So
Thanks.
silver maple, are you using those for syrup?
Yes.
That's awesome. That's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Thanks. So you have pigs. I know it's kind of controversial, but with like oak trees and acorns, do you feed acorns to your pigs? I know, again, I know
Yeah,
that's a controversial
there's a
topic.
huge oak tree over their plot that
Yeah,
they just fall in there and they eat them, and I'll even feed them to them.
they
But
do.
yeah,
Okay. I know in the US, some people don't do that and feel passionately about not doing that, but it seems to be widely practiced in Europe. So I'm always interested and curious when I meet pig owners.
yeah. I mean, I've never been told not to. My friend, I got coonies, and
Yeah.
so my friend he breeds them at Hematite Homestead, and so
Mhm.
he's never said it was bad for him, and and there's plenty of videos of me sitting there just popping them in their
Sure.
mouth and letting them eat them, and
Okay.
I've never heard anybody say anything. So, but what I wonder why they don't let them. Wonder why they say not to feed them.
It's something about the tannins.
Oh, I don't know. I'll have to check it out. But I've never had any issues because there's a
Okay.
huge oak tree hangs right over top of it, and the goat
Yeah.
and them both eat them like crazy all winter and fall. So, um,
Yeah, I
I
always thought that was so smart. If you have pigs and if you had that as a means of like food that you could rely on annually for them, plus like all the shade, like the BTUs are supposed to be crazy in terms of cooling power, which is something that I think a lot of us need this summer is just extra shade.
all right.
um, but then like with any perennial, with any tree, like we're talking about, yes, there's going to be a sense of maybe something that you can harvest in terms of food or animal fodder, but then also you have wood that you can coppice. And then just again, it is so huge. Like we have such an army of praying mantis around our property. I literally do not do any pest management on my part. They do it all for me. I am not out there picking off any eggs. I don't pick off insects. I
That's
have an army of people, or of people. I have an army of praying mantis that do that for me.
that's crazy because like here I only see a praying mantis maybe once or twice a year, and I have to actively go search for them the majority of the time, right? And like, there's just not that many here. We have a lot of bats,
That's
but
cool.
they're not doing a whole lot to go down into the actual leaves and eat these,
Yeah.
these pests. Because this year was horrible for some reason in West Virginia and Virginia there was an abundance of the squash bugs, right? The little yellow dotted ones and striped ones. And I mean to the point that I was like, okay, I don't want to do this, but if I don't spray something on them, I'm going to lose everything to the disease that they get, like yellow
Yeah.
vine disease and stuff.
Yeah.
So I sprayed. And now I didn't spray my zucchinis and stuff. I
Sure.
sprayed just my competition pumpkins, right? And
Yeah.
I didn't want to do that, but I didn't want to lose them to yellow vine disease either.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would go out there and there would be the blooms completely covered in like 20 to 30, these squash bugs. And I'm like, I've never seen this many squash bugs. Why are there so many? And then,
Yeah.
I'm thinking it's something I've done wrong or something. And then I started seeing lots of other pictures from a lot of other folks who had the same problem. And then there's, even up north, I guess, has had a problem. There's another giant pumpkin grower I know. He's Jamie Graham. He lives, I think New York or something like that. But he lost 2 plants this year to yellow vine disease. And, so it's been a problem all over.
Yeah.
What do you think contributes to a place seeing an abundance of that?
I mean, my honest opinion is that we just have an ecosystem that's out of whack. Like, it's just out of balance. And some years are worse than others because, for example, whatever needs to be in place in the natural ecosystem that eats these squash bugs or that eats their larvae so that they're not, or, prevents them from overwintering successfully, because it's the females that overwinter, there needs to be more of that. So then the question is, okay, so why isn't there that? And it's just, I think that things are just out of balance. I think in a lot of growing areas, a lot of farming, homesteading spaces, we tend to place or have placed a lot of importance, a lot of emphasis on annuals. We're not giving beneficial insects a habitat because they have nowhere to overwinter. And I think, we can get into things like over farming and blah, blah, blah. I think that things are out of whack. That's all. And that's what I'm trying to do here is I'm just trying to restore balance, not just within my farm ecosystem, but like within the natural ecosystem. Because I think if I have, like, my favorite example is if I have too many barn cats, I know that I'm going to be taking sustenance and forage away from the owls, and they're going to start going after my baby birds when I bring them in.
Right.
So I think we often think of, when we set up farms, like, what do I want? What animals do I want to keep? What ends up happening is then you hear all of these complaints about how, well, the coyote and the fox were going after my animals, and then now my cats are gone, and blah, blah, blah. It has to be a constant awareness, I think, of what is already in existence and maintaining that fine balance between what is already there and what you want to bring in.
Right. And being able to work with it.
Exactly.
Right. Because having excess of fox or excess of coyotes is bad, but
right.
They're good for the environment as a whole. Same with the owls and everything, same with other birds of prey. Yes. So let's just take me for example. What would be a suggestion of something you would recommend me doing, planting, whatever, to increase the beneficial insects and birds and things like that so that I could have a decrease in the squash bugs here?
The biggest thing for me was, I had my garden proper, my fenced in annual garden, right? And at the time that I was really getting into permaculture, I had no perennial plantings there. So this was something that was cleared out every fall, rested all winter long, and then was brought back to life in the spring. There wasn't a space for anything to overwinter. Right. When I started with 6 blueberry bushes in that space, 2 loganberries, and I started bringing in some perennial flowers. I think I had lobelia and coneflower at the time. And yeah, I had a few herbs in there, but nothing that was really like woody enough or dense enough for anything to hide in over winter. It was when I brought in those things that within the next season, I had an egg case for a praying mantis on 2 of my blueberry bushes. And I thought, hey, that's pretty cool. And I kind of looked at it as a coincidence, not really thinking that it was anything worth like attributing perennial plants to. I just kind of thought like, oh, cool, they found it. And since then, because, I've just been reading about all the benefits of perennial plants. We talked about carbon and such earlier. Now that I've been planting them more densely, it is incredible. They really do flock to these spaces to overwinter. They really do have a place here. Okay. And so my advice would just be start bringing in more perennials, whether you want it to be flowers, whether you want it to be something you can eat and harvest. I think the more dense the foliage is, the better. I think blueberries are great. I think raspberries, blackberries are great. If you can grow currants, those are wonderful. Um, and make it a part of your eating regimen in the summertime, you know?
Right. So like I started planting goji berries last year,
Cool.
and out of 6 of those that I started from seed, one came back this
Okay.
year. The other ones, we had that Arctic blast and it was like negative 30, 40 down here. It even killed my fig trees. They didn't even come back. And
Oh.
so, but I will start planting more. Is there like, I know you get a lot colder than I do here in West Virginia. So I would like to like know what types of blueberries and things like that that you're planting up there, because obviously you're going to be more affected by winter than I would be. So if I
Sure.
can get the same type, it would be better for me here.
Sure. Well, I'm doing the high bush varieties because that's what we do up here in the northern area. I have a lot of legacy blueberries. I really like those. I also started experimenting with honeyberries, which seems to be going well so far. And also, I'm really excited. I planted just this spring sea berries, and they're supposed to do really well across a wide range of climates. And they're little orange berries that are supposed to taste like a cross between a pineapple and a citrus of some
Oh,
type.
wow.
So
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. So I've got those in the ground now. Um, but then let's see, you had asked about blueberries, and what was the other thing you had asked about?
Like raspberries and blueberry, or raspberries, blueberries, blackberries, things like that.
Yeah, so I did the Navajo. I did a lot of Navajo blackberries, and then I also really like heritage blueberries because of the size, and they seem to be really hardy for us.
Okay. That's
Yeah,
that's good information, because like I said, I can take that and then I won't have to worry about anything dying. Well,
yeah, yeah.
hopefully it won't die back too awful bad in the winter. So these bugs, and I know you're gonna have to go here in a second, but these bugs, these beneficial insects, they're going and rooting or nesting in the roots of these plants.
I think it depends on the type of insect specifically. You know, with the praying mantis, they lay their eggs in the cases. I'm sure that the cases freeze. I'm going to mute myself for 1 second because there's a
Yeah.
helicopter going over. Hang on one
Yeah.
second. Okay, sorry about that.
No, you're fine.
Um,
You're fine.
there's a hospital not too far from me, and so they end up having the helicopter land there a lot. So I always know when it's on the way, and there's probably anyway. Um, no, like the praying mantis egg cases, they're late in the summertime, and then you can see them. They're so weird and rippled. I'm sure they freeze over the winter. I don't know where the females overwinter. I don't know if it's in the ground, but they're absolutely abundant. They come back every year. So that seems to be really good. With the cover crops that I do in my growing spaces, I think that provides a lot of winter cover and shelter and warmth for a lot of the critters that are in there. So much so that I always find baby rabbits, I always find mice. We let the baby rabbits have their spaces until they're old enough to leave and they go off. The mice are taken care of by the owls and the birds of prey that live around here and by the cats. So I think there's just a lot that you can do with cover crops and perennials. I think that's really good going into winter.
What kind of cover crops are you putting down, and when do you put them down?
So I like to do fall gardening. I start cutting back on what I'm growing in probably November, depending on how warm it is. Definitely by December, I would say 2/3 of the garden is closed. And what I try to do is sow cover crops in spaces probably towards the end of October.
Okay.
So when I sort of wean the garden growing spaces off. And at the end of October, I'll take the first section and I'll put, I like to do crimson clover. I like to do hairy vetch. And then I did one more last year, which isn't coming to mind at the moment. But I'm looking for things that not only fix phosphorus and nitrogen into the soil and potassium. I'm also looking for things that are good for beneficial insects and that are really going to add a lot of organic matter because I do turn it into place. I do leave it there. So I don't want something that's just going to get pulled and leave, you know?
Right.
Yeah,
So when you pull it, well, when you probably just cut and drop, right?
I do. Yeah. So what I use a rake
Okay.
and I break it up and just let it go. And sometimes it does grow back depending on the weather and how warm it is and when I'm able to actually go around to harvesting it in the garden. But what I do is I just rake it, let it drop in place. If it grows back, I rake it again.
Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
that's pretty, I mean, pretty simple to do. So have you seen that your soil has become looser and like fuller? Like here, I got clay soil, right?
Same.
So,
Same.
okay. So how has that helped your clay soil?
The best thing for clay soil and loosening that decompacted soil is going to be like a radish
Okay.
or a turnip. So
Okay.
forage turnip is really, really good. I mean, these turnips get huge and you let them go ahead and disintegrate right in the soil
Okay.
and it's much more loose. Now, if you do that for like 2 or 3 seasons in a row, you're going to be sitting a lot better than you were before you started. Is it going to be perfect? No, these things take time, especially if
Right.
you're allowing cover crops and that's it to loosen it up for you. Um, but forage turnip, I think there's something called like a forage radish or a black radish or something like that. That's really good. And then daikon radish, just because they get so massive, those are all great for loosening compacted soils.
And just leave all those right there.
Yeah.
Okay. That's some good
Yeah.
information.
Yeah. And what's even better is you can let your animals graze on the top of it. So they'll eat the forage. Your birds, your pigs, let them graze as long as they don't pull the root out of the ground. The forage will go back over the winter months. You'll be good to go.
So rotate them. So like once they
Yeah.
get up to a certain size, put the
Mm-hmm.
birds and stuff in there, let them eat the tops down, pull them back
Yeah.
out of there, right?
Yes.
Let the tops grow back and just continue to do that, right? Until
Yes.
that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
Really good idea.
Yeah. Then you're maximizing on your forage.
That's awesome. So I know you said you have to go here pretty soon, so I'm going to go on
Good.
ahead and wrap this up so you can get
Okay.
to doing your thing. So let's see here. August 29th, which is next week, we have Jesus Loving Homestead with Nathan and Carmen. September 5th, we got Nicole Smith Gardening. September 12th, we got Chase from Trophy Smack. They're the ones that sponsored us this year with the championship belt for the Size Doesn't Matter Pumpkin Challenge. September 19th, we got Suburban Homesteader, Wyoming, Arizona. So Sandy will be here with us. September 26th, we got Randall from Extreme Gardening and Travis Ginger. He's the one that has the 2,560-pound U.S. record for giant pumpkin. October 3rd, we got Yogi Hollow Farm. October 11th, which is a Wednesday, not Tuesday, we have Tony from Kettle Kitchen will be on. October 17th, we got Acorn Creek Farmstead. October 24th, we have Seven Ken Homestead. October 31st is open. November 7th through November 28th is open. December 5th, we have Enoch Graham from the Urban Gardener back on. December 12th through the 26th is open. So if any of you guys want to come on, you can email me at babydrill2119@yahoo.com. We'd love to have you. And Angela, I really thank you for coming on and spending time with us today. This has been a very, very informative, 43 minutes, and I've really enjoyed it. And so thank you so much for your time this evening.
Yeah. No, thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Yes, ma'am. I'd love to get you on again sometime soon, and maybe we could hash over some things that we didn't get to cover today, because you are a wealth of information. And guys, if you're not following her, go over to her Instagram and follow her over there. I think you got 2 of them, correct? 2 Instagrams?
Well, technically yes, but Axe and Root Homestead is the one I actually use. The one that's my name I haven't used in years. So
Okay.
Axe and Root Homestead, that's me on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok.
Okay. So guys, go over and follow her there. Trust me, there is loads of information, and it's awesome, awesome content. And I really enjoy watching her. Me and my wife can sit down and binge watch her for a long time. All right, guys. So if you're looking for something to binge watch and learn, go over and check her out over there at Axe and Roots Homestead, right?
Axe and Root. Yep.
So, guys, we're going to end this here. If you don't care, stay on, and I'll wrap it up with you on the other end of this, okay? And so, guys, we'll see y'all next time right here in the hollers and hills of West Virginia. See y'all.